Hello, I'm John Boyd, Manager of Law Enforcement Relations for Utility. Utility is an innovative technology company that continually delivers groundbreaking digital systems for frontline professions that depend on speed, accuracy, easy to access data, and transparency in their work. I'm a retired sheriff from LaPorte County, Indiana, and I served in law enforcement for 34 years. And I want to thank you for joining us today for Space for Knowledge, where we're joined by Dean Williams, who will give us expert insight into corrections. Dean is coming to us from our 49th state, our last frontier, the land of the midnight sun. Dean, welcome, my friend.
John, thanks for having me. I appreciate being with you today.
It's always great to see you. And can you give for our viewers some of your background and your history?
Yeah, sure will. 49th state, by the way, for those of you who are listening, is Alaska, by the way. Yeah, I'm sure you all knew that. I did my recent sort of work was I was the executive director of the Colorado Department of Corrections and led that system for 4 years. Before that, I was the commissioner. It's the same job, just different title. Commissioner of the Alaska Department of Corrections, and I took over the system here in Alaska and sort of during a troubled time. It was a job I did not think I wanted because I'd kind of already retired from government. I thought I'd worked around the state in different jobs. I ran juvenile facilities. I worked in the DA's office doing investigation work. I thought I was done with my sort of state career, and then I saw what was happening in the corrections field in my own state in Alaska, which convicted me by some things I'd seen, and I thought we could be better. And the governor appointed me to that in that position, and eventually took me to Colorado, which I had a great 4 years there. And so here I am with you today in my sort of semi-retirement state, or after having retired about 4 times, it hasn't stuck. So I'm doing some consulting work now, of course, to try to continue to advance the things I care about in corrections.
Well, I'm really glad that you're joining us here today, Dean. And I've been the beneficiary of spending some time with you. We've done some traveling together,
Right.
And your experience is just, it's amazing. I could sit down and talk to you for hours about your perspective. And we share a lot of the same kind of core values in the way your leadership style is and your transformational leadership that you have. I'm really interested to find out from you, in your 35 years of experience, what do you think the most significant challenges that you faced as an administrator in corrections?
Well, there's several, and I'll hit the high points. There's probably college courses on this issue, and so you're getting a talk from a guy like me who's, may not be viewed as competent as teaching those college courses, but there's experience as a wonderful teacher to you in both good and bad ways. Some ways it can kind of take you through the rough spots. But for me, I think there's several things that really matter in leading sort of correctional systems. One is, I firmly believe in, is that you have to have an executive team that is very functional before a crisis hits, right? You have to have people near you and that you trust and that they trust you. I strongly believe in servant leadership. And so I think that means openness, honesty with the boss. If you're the boss, that you have to have people be able to talk to you and try to wave you off and speak to your heart, and have people who are dedicated to sort of mission. And that sounds obvious, right? But some of the worst things I've seen happen is really when you don't have a team and you're facing a crisis, and everyone's fear sets in, and people aren't talking honestly with each other, and people are holding back. And so before you face any crisis, make sure you have the team near you that really matters. I believe in that book that was really, it condensed that one book I read, From Good to Great. It's really about the who, then the what. And the what certainly matters, but you really have to have it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in that space, getting accurate information when things are going wrong or when you're facing challenges, that you really have accurate information and you don't get too far down a road. Right, that you think you know what you're doing. I mean, if you look over the course of history, in our own government and others, a lot of mistakes have been made because we thought something was the reality in which we were dealing with, right? And have a hard time sort of pulling ourselves back once we say, well, now we know what happened, we should do, and we're going to do this. Then later on, information trickles in. And so part of the reason why I think I'm hanging out with all of you good folks at Utility is I really believe that the more accurate information we have and the video and transparency and all those things really matters. It's not just a nice buzzword. It really matters to us. And it matters in terms of decision making, and especially when you're having challenges or a crisis or something like the pandemic, of COVID-19 that I went through, we all went through when I was leading Colorado DOC.
Yeah, so assembling a good team of like-minded individuals who share maybe not the same ideas, but the same goals, the same mission.
Correct. Yeah, no, the last thing you want is people that think exactly like you do.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of precisely, I mean, you want people in the same mission, right? I mean, if you're out to transform a system to make it more humane, et cetera, you don't want the next number 2 or 3 next to you saying, hey, I like the way we've been doing it for the last 50 years. I'm like, that's not going to help me here. I mean, but you want people with varied perspectives and people who are not afraid to speak. Everyone at the end of the day knows you're the boss, right? And nobody got to that position without understanding who the boss was. But the thing that's hardest to overcome is I would tell people in my meetings, like, do not leave here. Do not leave here and give me what you think my opinion, what you think my opinion is, right? Because when I leave this and I make a decision on this particular difficult issue, I better know what your heart, what your head and your gut's telling you. And then I want you to explain to me. So nobody gets out of this meeting with some sort of collective group think going. So I think as a leader, if you can bust through that to say no, then you have a functional organization and many good things can happen after that. If you don't have that, I would gently suggest that you're in a little bit of trouble when the crisis does hit.
Yeah, I always said that in leadership, it's okay to have people that you surround yourself that have the word no in their vernacular. It's okay to say no and know what your limitations are, and to pull the boss aside and say, look, this really isn't a good idea. Let's look at it from this perspective. Everyone should bring a unique perspective when it comes.
I've been down that road, John. I've walked into meetings thinking I know what I'm going to be doing and pretty sure like this is the direction we're going. And then I walk out of the meeting going like, what the heck was I thinking? And that's because I had good people who were interested in all of our success, right? And part of the servant leadership is you're building people around you to be good leaders and to be transparent and have the highest integrity and to serve others, right? I mean, these leadership's role aren't about the title. I never felt like great about my title. I mean, I felt the weight of my responsibility to everybody else there. Everybody else was in my custody and the facilities, but also the people around me that I was modeling what I wanted them to do when I was gone, and or to continue on to be good servant leaders themselves. That was also a big part of what I thought my job was.
Right. So COVID obviously was a tremendous hurdle for those in corrections. And what was best practice today, tomorrow may be a practice that is discouraged. It's very important to be adaptable to ever-changing society, to ever-changing problems, and be adaptable to different solutions as well, to be able to think outside the box. And having a resilient team that surrounds you that aren't afraid to make decisions is really important, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The other thing that's important is you have other colleagues, that you have other friends that you're transparent with. So I was the chair of the Western States Correctional Leaders. Well, everybody sort of from Colorado West, if you will. And during the COVID, I had weekly meetings with my colleagues from all of the, Washington State, Oregon, California, Arizona, everybody. We had weekly meetings during the height of COVID because we wanted to learn from each other, because there was not a playbook about how to handle a pandemic in a correctional system. And some systems did better than others. I think we did better. I mean, I still lost incarcerated people to COVID. I saw lost staff to COVID. I remember calling their spouses, and sending my regrets. And I mean, these were hard days, really hard days. But we were learning, really importantly, we were learning from each other's successes and failures and being open about what that looked like. And so Colorado avoided some of the gaffes my colleagues were making. But they were transparent enough to be honest. I had directors from other states, back east, that I would ask to bring on to meet with me and my colleagues who are running Western state systems. So we avoided some of the errors that were just happening because we were still all figuring it out. And so open and transparent with the people who are around you and having that team, but also having an extended team. And if you're a sheriff or you're someone in corrections or jail system, I certainly hope that you're either going to conferences or getting to know your colleagues around the country and saying, hey, how are you handling? What do you think of that? And being open to the fact that maybe you don't have a complete vision about what you want to lead on or what you want to transform. Because I think that openness is your friend. As C.S. Lewis would say, I would not appreciate the love of a friend so much if I did not have their honesty first. And so I think that's really important in terms of how you manage and lead through any circumstance, but especially challenges.
Yeah, I've taken away a lot of things from our conversations, Dean, and one of the things that I've learned from you is a leader in corrections and in law enforcement, for that matter, should not have the attitude as though they have the corner in the market on ideas. And
oh my
best
Lord.
practices are really important because they're tested, and therefore you're not reinventing the wheel, right?
Well, exactly. And I never thought when I walked into a room with people that I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I realized that I was considered the number one guy in the room, or in terms of the top guy, the final decision maker. And by the way, that should not be lost on you. You know, a lot of other people who are providing counseling, but if you're going to make a gap, make sure it's your own and not somebody else's. You know, if you're in leadership, you're leading. And at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. You can't say, well, my number 2 or 3 thought it was a good idea. No. So having said that, though, in these positions, you're very much a generalist, right? I mean, I'm a generalist. I don't know how you felt, John, about you, but I had all these people working for me that were specialists that had far more training, far more education. What about my medical people going through COVID? I mean, I'm gonna pop off and tell the doctor who's been a physician for 25 years and who's studying every article he can find about the pandemic, et cetera. Now, I could struggle with him about operationally how his thoughts and opinions matter, right? But I want want his opinion, not mine. And there's all kinds of positions like that. There's, you have not only your medical people, but you have really, I mean, I know part of this discussion and part of it around technologies, but I mean, I know what my position is in regards to that. I have very smart people around this, but and so as a generalist, right, you want specialists that you are leading and that you're supervising to thrive, right? And you want them to be safe, psychologically safe with you, and to struggle over hard decisions and not to let one conversation derail our relationship, right? And so that's the challenge of being a leader and being assertive and strong enough, and but also being humble enough on the other hand to know that you might be over your head and you should be reaching out, or in the very sense, maybe it's your time to be quiet, right? When there's another struggle going on that you need that to play out until you can form an opinion about something. So that sounds kind of basic in some ways, but I'm telling you, when you get pushed in these jobs, there's a lot of pressure to act like you know what the heck is going on every minute of every day. And that's just a false premise, to be quite frank. And so that's why you need a team of people and any other associated sort of technologies and things like that to help.
Yeah, COVID presented a lot of unanticipated consequences. I think you'll agree with this. Maybe I wasn't bright enough to realize some of these consequences as a result of COVID, but it was new for all of us when we were going through it. But certainly staffing, morale, because of staffing, because of morale, because of the limited number of people that you can have in your facility, not wanting your employees to be in any more of a congregative setting than what they're already in, having the additional training locations. It was just a challenge for us. So how did you overcome that as an administrator of a really large group of facilities?
Well, I mean, this is a very fair question. And I don't know how I would grade myself in terms of how I did during that, but here were some things that I relied upon. I relied upon frequent and open and honest communication with the staff. Who I remember back in the day, we were sending people into prisons, right, to work there when there were 300 or 400 incarcerated population. And by the way, I'm just going to put this out there. This is not the fault of the incarcerated population. COVID came into prisons because our staff were unintentionally carrying it. That's how we infected our family members and everybody else, right? We didn't know we had it, and we passed it on, and it was just a horrible virus because it's tricky. And so I was sending staff back in when I wasn't allowed even to go back into my own prisons, right? First of all, to protect, because we were limited the number of people to come in just to try to protect the incarcerated population and the rest of the staff that were there. So the least I could do is make sure that I was having regular communications and honest and open, even about the decisions I know some of my staff are going to disagree with, right? And to acknowledge that, to say, look, if you were in my seat, you may be making a different decision. I totally get that. But I'm here, and the best counsel I've gotten, and talking around the country to colleagues, and I explained why that, and then that's the decision. I mean, that's where we're going. So that was around all kinds of difficult issues like visitation, about who was even allowed in the prisons, about, bonuses for vaccination, because there were people who didn't believe in that, and there's people who don't, and I'm not criticizing one way or another, wherever you're at on that sort of spectrum. But for me, we were making decisions based upon the best medical advice we had at the time. And a lot of that was accurate, but some of it wasn't. And some of it caused, can cause doubt amongst your staff. And so I think being open about it and saying, look, hey, here's another gnarly issue. What if you only have a certain amount of money to pay? You can't get everyone raises, but you can give some of your people raises, right? And not everybody. What do? Do you not give anybody raises because you're like, oh, this is going to be too difficult? So because we were facing recruitment issues, and we still are as a country around correctional officer staffing. It is a looming crisis. It's not a looming crisis. It's a crisis in play right now, worse in some states than others. So I'm looking, and that's another reason why I'm hanging out with all you folks, John, is that I'm looking, because I believe some of the technology things as leaders we've kind of haven't really paid attention to, and there's things we can do that can make our environment safer and better for everybody, right? Incarcerated population, staff, educational leaders, the social work staff, visitors, volunteers who come in. There's some things we can do that can help help transform these environments to be a better place to work and live if you're incarcerated there.
So with that said, what is some of the technology that you would recommend that's out there to help improve safety and morale of correctional facilities?
Yeah, this sounds like sort of a setup question, and it kind of is, but and I mean that in a really good, sweet way. What I mean by that is that there are technologies out there that I think as correctional leaders we haven't really thought about. And quite frankly, I'm a little embarrassed by some of my own ignorance when I was leading 2 state systems because you don't know what you don't know, right? And you have to invite people near you and people in the business community. Yeah, who of course they want to sell you their product, and that's fair. But really, you can learn a lot from folks who want to really help you in leadership as you're leading these systems. And I know a lot of people in the business community were my personal friends now. And it wasn't an obligation. I was going to buy their equipment over somebody else's. But I learned a lot about technology or things that a guy like a generalist like me wouldn't know about. So one of them, for example, one of the reasons why I'm hanging out with you guys a bit and talking to you about the future in the field of corrections is because I believe body cameras are the future for the correctional system. It just is. This has been the current situation with law enforcement, but there's a host of reasons, right, why body cameras in the corrections field are just essential. And if I wasn't having this conversation with you, John Boyd from Utility, I'd be having it with somebody else. It's just the truth of it. The truth of it is that the liability issues that are occurring in the correctional systems and the spurious lawsuits and allegations that I lost count of how many lawsuits I had against me as the director. It wasn't action I took, but it was action my employees took, right? But you get named as the executive in all these. One of the big aspects was that he said, or is it conflicting information, trying to figure out what's going on. And so one, I think it helps protect against spurious allegations. Here's the second thing, and maybe the most important one to me, is that it provides a level of safety for the staff and the incarcerated population that we haven't had before. And it helps a little transparency, as my daddy or some of my family used to say, is a disinfectant for a lot of bad things, right? And so that's really important, and that will help us with our staffing crisis too. And many of us been talking about this for a while. But I can talk about it more freely now. And that is that I just think it's essential. If we want to recruit people, we need to have these prison environments be much safer than what they have been, more humane than what they have been, not just for the incarcerated population, but for our staff. And if we don't have staffing, believe me, these prisons are going to be in more trouble than some of them are, including my own. I'm not throwing a stone. I mean, we had serious staffing issues at a couple of our prisons, and I lost some sleep over it. So I think body cameras, related technologies, making things easier for cameras to store information, being able to pass, the old stuff that I was dealing with back in Alaska about even fixed cameras and how you get a recording and how you move it to the DA's office, how this stuff, that was so complicated. And I know that I know the utility and others, are facing this thing. And when I learned a lot about the things you guys are doing, I said, these are people I want to help, because it's going to help overall safety inside the prison system. And that's what I'm about. And it also helps advance humanity. And because we want our staff talking to our incarcerated population, we want them to have a working relationship. This isn't about keeping staff over here and the inmates over here. No. We want modeling. We want interactions. With that comes some risk, being over familiarity and things like that. And body cameras can help alleviate that and help protect against that. So there's a host of reasons why I think we need to sort of move into the future here around use of some of these technology, and body cameras really for me is a big one. We did deploy some of them in Colorado, but we were on the cusp of it. And I've been watching my colleagues around the country, and they're saying the same thing I am, by the way. I'm not an outlier on this. This is just the future.
Yeah, Dean, you said a couple of words that really impressed me. Humane, you emphasized that a couple of times, transparency as well. And it's important to have humane conditions where people feel safe, not only the inmate population, but certainly the staff and those that come to service the facilities as well, volunteers, educators, medical staff. Correctional facilities are a lot like cities. They have the same problems that cities have. They have crime that occurs there, and they house some very volatile and very dangerous people. Staffing is directly correlated to the morale. Some of your best recruiters can be those that work there. And if your employees are happy, they're out actively recruiting. It's a fun place to work. It's rewarding. It can be very, not financially, but it can be enriching for a person, helps to meet their social needs. It can be a really good place to work. They're really, our correctional employees are unsung heroes. We drive by, the average citizen drives by a correctional facility, and we want to pretend that we don't know what goes on in there, out of sight, out of mind. But the people that manage the population are fantastic people. And if we can give them the tools that help them better manage that population and help to keep them and the population that they're managing safer, really, that's really important. I think one of the keys to body cameras, because I think you'll agree that the inmate population, the staff knows where the fixed cameras are. Facilities today are full of hundreds, if not thousands, of fixed cameras. But everybody knows where there aren't fixed cameras, and those body cameras can go places where the fixed cameras just don't have the footage. So it helps to keep everybody safe against the allegations, unfounded allegations, or maybe it's something that has some validity to it. But the inmates are less likely to act out if they know that they're being recorded and they're not in a quote unquote dead zone.
That's exactly right. The other thing is that again, this gets back to sort of my own ignorance about things, is that I didn't realize that there are like your body cameras, I didn't realize that there's equipment out there that really acts as an officer down feature too. Back in the day, I was contemplating, I ran juvenile facilities too, right? Here in Alaska. And so we were looking at how do I increase my officer safety, even our juvenile facilities or our adult facilities. And back in the day, we used to have a little officer down button, right? Or officer down feature that if you went prone or something, you could push the button and someone would come and run. At least they know where you're at. Well, I mean, your body cameras have an officer down feature. I didn't know any of that when I was leading both systems, right? Just that one feature alone, right, is this a dramatic safety enhancement for our officers, right? To know that everything's being recorded and they have another eyewitness, if you will, to any interaction or event that's occurring inside the prison. But the second thing is if something, it really does go south, and you get knocked down or fall down or you're running to some place, right? The features of a lot of this technology can say, hey, Williams is running. Williams doesn't run normally. Where's he running to? And you can have an alert in your control tower or wherever your communications center is in your facility. And someone can go like, hey, I wonder if there's a problem over there. And at least you have some situational awareness. The thing that scares a lot of staff and would scare me, quite frankly, is being in a place when something's going south and I don't have anybody else around that knows it's going south. With all, I mean, most of the time, not all the time, but one of the comforts you have on law enforcement, right, is that you're in a lot of radio communications a lot of times. So even when you're out on a car or something like that, people know you're out on a car. Your dispatcher knows you're out on a car, right? Well, it's not going to necessarily, what's happening at the scene is one thing, but at least you have somebody who's remembering where you're at and knows where you're at and is going to check in on you, right? Staff are alone with 50, 60, 80 inmates at a time. And so that's really important for our staff safety. The other thing is that you and I've talked about is that I believe if we want to make these environments safer, they have to be not only more transparent, but more humane for everybody. And I know this is a bit of a dilemma that people stand. I have other people who've argued with me about this, but I just say with all due respect, you have to hear me on this. There's one truth I know, and that making prisons harsher than what they already are benefits nobody. Nobody. It doesn't benefit certainly the incarcerated population, definitely does not benefit the staff. It makes the staff jobs even harder and makes them quit and they don't want to go to work there. And the third thing it does, and hear me on this one, is that it does not advance public safety. It erodes public safety even further by releasing people from prison. Because remember, 95% of the people in prison are getting out, right? And as the Scandinavians say, who do you want to be your neighbor, right? Somebody who has a job, who has a future, who's reconnected with his children, who's reconnected with his church community, his faith community, and others, or somebody has none of that, who has no job, has no future, has no hope, right? Who do you want? Do you want them living next to you? I don't think so. So if you want to advance public safety, and we're concerned about crime, issues and criminal justice reform issues, I say, look, okay, have all that discussion, decide what you're going to do about sentencing and things like that. But if you want to advance public safety, prisons have to be humane places because these people are coming out again. And we wouldn't put a dog in a cage and then poke him with a stick, right? Expect that dog to come out and not have some bad feelings about me as the master, right, of that dog. And I would say you have to approach this issue with our correctional system very similar. You have to understand that we want functional, purpose-driven things with activities, education, people learning things, right? Learning new ways, programming, volunteers, people coming in. There's a reason why I focused on all that in Colorado, because it's not just about making things nicer. It's about purpose and reducing recidivism. Colorado had a 50% recidivism rate, totally unacceptable. 50% of the people getting out were coming back to prison. How's that acceptable to anybody? Alaska was worse, John. I'm ashamed to say I didn't have enough time, and people here, we still haven't made progress. That's just totally unacceptable. That is the highest risk to public safety you can get, of having 10s and 20s and 30s of people 100 people getting out of prison a month or a day and say, well, 50% of them are going to commit new crimes again. I mean, you want to know what the target population for public safety is? That's it. So that's why you have to get real intentional about what you're doing in these correctional systems.
Yeah, I agree. And you and I've had several conversations. So, one of the tools that I used was food. Food is a tremendous motivator. It certainly is for
Absolutely.
me. Come 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm curious as to what I'm going to have for dinner. And for our incarcerated population, many of them unfortunately have nothing to look forward to except their next meal. And it can be a behavior modifier. So we fed better meals that certainly met their needs and requirements. It was nutritious, it was well balanced, but it tasted good as well. And I found, and I think you'll agree, that when an inmate's tummy is satisfied, they're less likely to act out.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I've taken this kind of one step further. I think the biggest enemy we have in the correctional system, including some of our own, what I call innocent ignorance, right? We just don't know what we don't know, is really the idleness that has existed in prisons. Idleness is not good for anybody. I guess my daddy was right when he said, idle hands are the devil's workshop, as that old saying goes. But it's true. It's true with our children. It's probably true with us as adults, even here on public work. Sitting around doing nothing all day is probably not a good plan. And it's definitely not good in the correctional environment. People have to have a reason. Again, you and I both know there are people in prison who scare us and who are dangerous people. And thank goodness they're there, truly. But there's a bunch of other people, right, who made a really bad choice when they were a younger man or woman, and who now want to find a way home, who now want to be a good person. They don't want the moniker of being a convict, right? They abhor those sort of titles because they really want to move on. They want to say, can I ever be forgiven for the bad thing that I am absolutely taking full responsibility for, that I am making amends for? Can I find a way forward? And those people need something to do while they're there. They need productive activities and not sitting and just wasting, because idleness is a terrible. It's the most torture. If you've talked to people who've been in, like, what is the most difficult part about being in prison? It's just the lack. It's just the idleness and the lack of meaning, and that makes prisons dangerous. And that is another discussion for another day. But I hope that the folks that are listening to me understand that this whole notion that this is not about making prisons softer or nicer or any of that stuff. This is about making it more purpose-driven and more intentional and more results-driven. You cannot have prisons that we have and the number of people we're incarcerating in this country with the kind of results that we have. We just can't, because we're perpetuating an erosion of public safety. And that is my final throwdown, if you will. We have to care about what happens in these places, because the consequences of not caring about it impact all of us, not just the incarcerated people, not just the staff who are spending a good portion of their lives working there, right? It's for everyone else too, because if we want to advance public safety, we want to advance meaning and purpose behind the walls. So when these people have a future, right, that we're helping prepare for the next chapter and giving them the opportunity for redemption, right? Many people won't take it. They won't take it. We get that. But there's an opportunity for redemption. That's our job in the corrections world, is providing that opportunity.
Dean, I really enjoy your perspective. I enjoy you lending your expertise, and I want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Space for Knowledge. And let's get technology in the hands of the people that need it to help keep them safe and the people that they're managing safe. And in the meantime, please be well, be safe, and stay vigilant.
Thank you, friend. Appreciate you having me, and good luck, and my best to all of you who are watching, who are interested in this field, and be encouraged, be of good cheer, because we need you and we need your involvement in the future of our correctional system. So thank you, John. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dean. Stay warm.